By September 25, 1974, Robert Fripp had reached a breaking point. King Crimson was finished, and he wasn't just walking away from a band, he was walking away from the entire concept of the guitar hero. To Fripp, the rockstar was an obsolete model of the 1960s, a vessel for ego that had become a barrier to actual music. He entered a self-imposed exile, a 7-year retreat from the music industry, to study the philosophy of J. G. Bennett, a Sherborne house. He wanted to see what was left of a musician once the ego was stripped away. He spent those years not as a master, but as a student of the Gurdjieff system, effectively erasing his own identity to prepare for what came next.
I left King Crimson for a number of reasons, and one way of putting that forward would be to say that it was no longer an appropriate form of education.
When he finally re-emerged in 1981 with a new band called Discipline, which would eventually be renamed King Crimson, he didn't just have new songs, he had a new operating system.
In a flash, the insight or whatever lasted about half a second, and I simply saw that Robert Fripp didn't exist.
This was the birth of the alien calculus. That's the overall idea of Discipline. Discipline is, as it says on the album cover, not an end in itself, only a means to an end. The heart of this system was a radical rejection of the star system found in 70s rock.
The natural product of our particular culture is the star system.
Fripp had become obsessed with the gamelan music of Indonesia, a collective interlocking style of percussion where no single player is the lead. In a gamelan ensemble, every musician is a gear in a massive shimmering clock. You have somewhere between a democracy and a true anarchism. Not so much that there is not any ruler, but that everyone has equal ruling authority.
You couldn't conceivably have stars within gamelan. It simply wouldn't be possible.
To replicate this on a guitar, Fripp needed a technique that was perfectly surgical. The principle of succession states that in any ascending, each of the preceding fingers remains in contact with the string and maintains the pressure. This led to his specific, brutal brand of crosspicking, which he would later codify in his guitar craft courses starting on March 25, 1985 at Claymont Court in West Virginia. A standard rock guitar is built on the pentatonic box, a shape that feels natural to the human hand because it mirrors our biology. Standard alternate picking is a simple pendulum motion of the wrist. It relies on momentum and feel. Fripp's alien calculus threw that away. He replaced the pendulum with a tight elliptical orbit of the pick. It's a method designed to eliminate any wasted movement, allowing for the dizzying, non-stop speed of a track like Fracture without the muscle fatigue that stops most guitarists. There is another seemingly contradictory principle, which is the principle of constant release. This principle takes precedence over the principle of succession in extended fingering and in speed fingering. It isn't about playing fast, it's about being efficient to a degree that feels mechanical. But the physical technique was only half of the equation. To truly break his old habits, Fripp changed the very geometry of the instrument. By tuning in fifths like a cello or a violin, he stretched the guitar's range and forced himself to think in intervals that felt fundamentally un-guitar-like. If you are used to playing in 4, then to suddenly work in 5, you have to drop your licks and then pick up a few new ones. The old muscle memory of blues licks and power chords became useless. Every time his hand touched the fretboard, he had to solve a logic puzzle just to find the major scale. This mathematical rigor defines the 1981 Discipline sessions at Basin Street Studios. While other prog legends were pivoting to radio-friendly pop and simplified structures, Fripp was running code. In the opening of Frame by Frame, he and Adrian Belew utilized a technique called phase shifting, inspired by the minimalist composer Steve Reich. Fripp plays a 7-note pattern in 7/8 time, while Belew plays the same pattern but omits the last note, effectively playing in 13/16. For exactly 91 beats, the two guitars slide further and farther out of sync, creating hallucinogenic blur of notes that shouldn't be possible for two humans to maintain. It's a high-wire act where the safety net is made of pure calculus. On the 92nd beat, they miraculously align again, a moment of physical release that feels like a gear finally snapping into place. To make this calculus audible, Fripp leaned into the newest tech of the era, but he used it as a microscope rather than an effect. In 1980, Roland released the GR300 guitar synthesizer. Unlike previous synths that were slow and mushy, the GR300 tracked the guitar signal fast enough to keep up with Fripp's rapid-fire picking. It gave him a cold, piano-like attack that highlighted every single mathematical collision.
And everything else I've been doing recently. What we added, though, is the vintage part of it. This is my original GR300, the one I played with King Crimson in 1981. It was played on things like Industry, Sheltering Sky, Three of a Perfect Pair, all that music.
When you hear that bright metallic chime on The Sheltering Sky, you're hearing the sound of a calculus being solved in real time. But there was a darker, more exhausting side of this precision. Your attention is spread 16 bars ahead and 16 bars behind, and then to the end of the piece and the beginning of the piece. Fripp's rules of the room meant that any deviation from the mathematical grid was a total failure. During the 1981 tour, which kicked off at Mole's Club in Bath on April 30th, the tension on stage was palpable. In tracks like Telahan Ginjet, the use of polymeters, a 7/8 guitar riff played over a 4/4 drum beat, creates a sensation of rhythmic vertigo. It forces the listener's brain to choose a side. You can't follow both rhythms at once. Your brain short-circuits trying to bridge the gap.
For example, if this is R4, you can have a basic 5 on top of it. But can you take it faster? And can you bring your mind to a sufficient point of independence outside that 5?
This tension reached its peak in the title track, Discipline. Here, the guitars work in cycles of 5 or 7, while Bill Bruford and Toll 11 anchored the band in a steady 4. For several bars, it sounds like the band is in different zip codes, vibrating at frequencies that tell your subconscious something is fundamentally wrong. It feels like watching a car engine vibrate itself apart at 9,000 RPMs. And then, at a precise mathematical intersection, it resolves. What makes this alien calculus so enduring for us isn't the perfection, it's the friction. Fripp proved that you could take the most rigid, heartless mathematical structures and use them to capture the most fragile, messy parts of being alive. He showed that the most beautiful part of a machine isn't when it's running perfectly, it's the moment it starts to vibrate under the pressure of its own impossible speed. Fripp didn't just return to the stage in 1981, he redefined the purpose of the guitar. He proved that you could be complex without being bloated, and technical without being soulless. He turned the instrument into a laboratory and the audience into a test subject, because when you listen to that crosspicking, your brain isn't just hearing notes, it's trying to solve an equation it can't quite grasp, feeling for a heartbeat inside the machine. Next time you put on Discipline, don't just focus on the melody, try to count the cycles, try to find the moment the gears shift and the phase shift aligns. notice how your own breathing changes when the math doesn't add up. Let me know in the comments, do you find this Fripp's math to be a tool for liberation, or it's just a cold mathematical cage? Thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Have a good day.